Okay, so now the sticks are fading out much faster. Okay, but they are doing so in a much faster speed than expected. Huh. Okay, let's try 0.1. Okay, so sometimes when you test animations in script, okay, you have to do so via trial and error. Of course, in Unity you can use the animator to create animations, but sometimes you have to use scripts to do so. Okay, so what we are aiming for here is to have the sticks fade out, but not when they are towards the bottom of the screen. Okay, so we are almost there. So 0.075. Okay, by the way, if you are planning to make games using Xcode, you can consider using SpriteKit, which is Apple's new SDK for making games. Okay, so we'll take this as our animation. And the next thing that we need to do okay, so you might have noticed that I have a lot of comments throughout my script, and that is okay to sort of help me when I go back to a script after many days later. You can think of it as a note to remind you of what we have to do and explaining what and why it matters. Okay, so we actually have to do this over here. Okay, this is where when the projectile hits the ground. So when it hits the ground, we will check for any nearby enemies. And we will stun them. So to do so, let's get the spawner, which is what I use to spawn enemies. Okay, so let's get the number of enemies at the current stage, and we'll check if there are any nearby enemies which can be stunned by the special skill. Okay, so we only need to check for the x-axis, as it's not, even though Stars has fantasy elements in it, it's not realistic to have an enemy on the top getting stunned when you shoot the or use the special skill at the bottom of the stage. So that means we only need to check for the x-axis, and the y-axis will be roughly the same. Okay, so let's get each enemy. Okay, we can also approach this from another angle, where we create an imaginary box around the projectile or the effect which we saw just now, and within this box we can define how big it is, and within this box, if there are any enemies within it, then we will stun those enemies. Okay, so let's create a box first. Hey, thanks Viper. Thanks for following and dropping by as well. Okay, have a good night rest, and I hope to see you soon. Okay, so if the imaginary box intersects with the enemy's box, okay, so instead of doing this, we'll use the enemy's location instead, since the enemy's box might not be accurate. Okay, because sometimes you create or you design a character and you might leave some transparent space in the image. Okay, so if we just take the enemy's box as it is, okay, it will also take that transparent space, which is not accurate. So we'll use the enemy's location instead. Oh, vector 3. So if the enemy's location is within the box, then we will stun this enemy. Okay, this enemy dot set. Okay, to do so, we'll get the animator for this enemy. And we'll set if stun as true. By the way, the rubies thing is still a work in progress, so it isn't working at the moment. Okay, but once I have it working, you will see a bot that will observe and keep track of anyone who is in the live stream. Okay, we also need to check that the special attack type is stunning nose. Okay, because there will be other special attack types in the future when we add new characters to the game. Okay, so we also have to stop the enemy from moving when it gets stunned. Stop it from moving. Set it to stun animation. Okay, now let's test what we have just written. So if this works, okay, the enemies within the radius or the blast radius will be stunned. So let's test it by coming over here and using it on these 3 enemies in the middle. Okay, so as you can see, these 3 enemies are stunned. Okay, but now we need to undo the stun. Oh, okay. So the range isn't really that huge. Okay, let's try that again, since for some reason the animation for row isn't returning back to the normal animation, which is what you see over here. Okay, so now it returns back to the idling animation. Okay, so the next thing that we need to do is to damage the enemies. Okay, so this enemy take damage, attack power, true. Okay, so essentially you can use roll special skill to do an sort of area of effect skill. Oh yes, I actually do have a GitHub, but I kind of haven't used it in a long while, so I can't remember my account name. I might go and create a new one since which means that I can't remember the password as well. I guess it has been, what, a few years maybe since I last used it. Interesting. Okay, so is that the game you want to start off with, as in Flappy Bird? Okay, for a game like Flappy Birds, I think you have to take note that the background is scrolling endlessly, and depends on how you go about it. Okay, so if you want to make it to learn, I know that there are quite a number of tutorials on the web that you can learn how to do or how to make Flappy Birds. Okay, but for Flappy Bird you have to take note of the physics in the game. Okay, especially when you tap to make it go up, but if you don't carry on tapping, it will go down. And you will also have to, there are not too many sprites that you have to take note of, just the pipes, the background, and the flapping animation. Okay, so I'm not sure of the term SK physics body, but I assume it is something that SpriteKit provides you to create a physics body for your sprite. So I assume you are using SpriteKit in Xcode. Okay, so this is also Ray's website. So you can also follow this tutorial if you want. It will show you how to create the SK physics body. Okay, and I assume that when you add SpriteKit to the SpriteKit framework to your game, it already includes the SK physics body.